So, welcome to the introduction to the baseline selling sales process. The baseline selling sales process uses, you guessed it, you see it, the baseball diamond is our metaphor for the sales process. If you look at the four bases, you can see that in a generic sales process, the four bases trace the evolution of a sales process as it goes from suspect to prospect to qualified to closable. So, in this case, those become our stages of the sales process: the suspect stage, the prospect stage, the qualified stage, the closable stage. So a suspect is when we have a meeting booked, a first meeting with a new opportunity. A prospect, second base, is when we believe that opportunity is a quality opportunity. A qualified opportunity is one that is fully qualified. And finally, there is scored. So in its generic form, it's simple to understand and see the evolution of the sales cycle. But let's put some milestones on it. In most cases, regardless of how you've reached out or connected with a potential customer, whether it's by phone or by LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook or some other social media, the first thing you're going to have to do is have a conversation during which you identify some kind of an issue that you believe you can help with, and that causes the prospect to schedule a meeting with you. That could be a scheduled phone call, a scheduled Zoom, or a scheduled face-to-face. And now you're at first base. You have a suspect. It should be in your CRM application at this point. The next goal is to get that prospect to second base, where they will legitimately be called a prospect. So between first and second base is where you build a case, and that consists of the following milestones. You've established that they need it, because it doesn't make much sense to try and sell something to someone who doesn't need what you have. You've uncovered a compelling reason to buy it, and buy it from you instead of anybody else. That's a real key milestone in the sales process. You've also been able to monetize it or quantify it. So in many cases, the compelling reason is going to center around a problem or a frustration or an issue they have. And as you uncover the compelling issue, they get emotional. And when you monetize it or quantify it, you're able to attach a cost to the problem. Sometimes the compelling reason will be an opportunity. And when you monetize or quantify it, you'll have the cost or the value of the opportunity. From that, you get urgency. And with urgency, everything changes. Now, while you're uncovering the compelling reason to buy and going through the monetizing process, you're developing SOB quality. And SOB does not stand for son of the boss. It's actually a baseball term, speed on the bases. And we use it to illustrate differentiation. And I'm going to go to baseball for a moment and show you how that works. So in baseball, when a speedy runner reaches first base, everybody in the stadium knows that that speedy runner is going to try and steal second base. But the pitcher, under today's rules, gets 3 chances to attempt a pickoff. So they'll throw over to first base and hope to either shorten the runner's lead, tire the runner out, get the runner leaning in the wrong direction, and pick them off. But at some point, the pitcher has to pitch to the hitter. And the hitter has an advantage here because they're only going to get a fastball. Curveballs, sliders, changeups, knuckleballs, splitters are all off-speed pitches, and that doesn't give the catcher enough time to throw a runner out. With a fastball, the catcher has enough time to catch it, throw it down to second base, and get the runner. And that all has to happen in 2 seconds or less. That 2 seconds is called pop time. The amount of time it takes from being in the catcher's glove to the catcher popping up, throwing down to second base to throw the runner out. And I know about pop time because my son is a college catcher, and in this video you'll see my son throwing the runner out at second base for the 3rd out against the inning. So back to the hitter again. The hitter has an additional advantage in addition to knowing that a fastball is coming. They also change the infield defense. In a normal infield, the first baseman is back on the grass behind first base. The second baseman is on the grass behind or in between first and second base. But when there's a speedy runner on first, the first baseman is literally on first base, holding that runner on to take the throws from the pitcher, and the second baseman comes in halfway and moves closer to second base so that they're either in a position to take a throw from the catcher, or what they call double play depth. If there's a ground ball, they can easily cover second base and relay the throw to first. That opens up this huge gap between first and second base. So a hitter with good bat control, which is the hitter they usually place in the lineup right behind the speedy hitter, can just punch the ball through between first and second base, and our speedy base runner gets at least to third base and might even be able to score on that play. So when the runner gets the pitcher to pay more attention to him than the batter, we have speed on the bases. That's SOB quality. And if we translate that to selling, when you get the prospect to pay more attention to you than anyone else, you have SOB quality. So now we're at second base, and the goal is now to get to third base. That's where we gauge their ability to buy from us. So the first thing is they have to be committed to solving their problem. Then they have to be willing to pay more to do business with us. We need to have met with decision makers, stakeholders, and anyone else that's going to influence that decision. We need to understand the timeline for that decision and the decision-making process and the decision-making criteria. There are going to be some additional milestones that'll be specific to you and your business that you have to go through to know that an opportunity is fully qualified, especially when we're talking about something design, build, or engineered or custom. And your technology people and their technology people have to meet and make sure that what needs to be done is doable. And finally, it needs to be win-win. It has to be good for you and for your potential customer. So now we're at third base and we need to run home. And running home is where you get to be the value. You become the differentiator. And the milestones for running home are: this is where you get to talk about your capabilities. This is where you get to incorporate your value proposition. This is where you can propose, and ultimately close. And in baseline selling, it's an inoffensive close. So that is the sales process, and of course it can be customized for your business. But what's important to note is that most salespeople, they get on first base, they book their meeting, and then they run right across the diamond over to third base because they're most comfortable presenting capabilities and talking about value and talking about the company and talking about themselves and doing presentations and demos and creating proposals. And they sometimes fall into the trap that their potential customer sets for them, where they're there for their first meeting and the customer says, "So, show us what you can do for us." And that's an invitation to present, to talk. So the first thing you need to know when you're operating within the baseline selling framework, and it is a framework, is you need to know where you are. You need to have some awareness of what you're being asked to do, and where that's supposed to happen. So if you're standing on first base and a prospect asks you to present to them, you need to say to yourself, wait a minute, that happens at third base, not at first base. So in this situation, you need to at least be able to say, I'd love to lower resistance. We talked about that already. I'd love to, but I'd like to put it in context. Experience tells me, that's a very powerful thing to say. Experience tells me that when my potential customer gives me some context for what they're asking, then it makes more sense when I show them what we can do. Is it okay if I ask you a couple of questions first? And when you ask a couple of questions, you skip back to first base, and you can run the process that way. The other thing to keep in mind is that when you run straight across to third base and you start presenting, you've skipped all of this real estate in blue, the guts of the sales process. The most important part of the sales process happens between first and second base, where you build a case, and between second and third base, where you gauge their ability to buy. If all you do is book a meeting and then you start presenting and proposing and quoting, That's when you end up chasing prospects who don't return your calls or who don't buy from you. So it's very important, if you find yourself standing at third base and you shouldn't be, that you reverse direction, ask if you can ask a couple of questions, and start the sales process from first base like you should.